Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar. It's Wednesday again at 12 o'clock, so we must all be in the same place again. So thanks a lot for joining us today, and we're already getting quite a large number of people joining us for this afternoon's session. And we're going to be looking at something that is probably a little bit of an unknown gem in the Microsoft stack, and SharePoint Lists. Now, the aim of these webinars is always so that anybody who's adopting the 365 stack, no matter where your journey is in adopting NEP, you can start learning about the benefits, understanding what you're going to be asking the business for, or if you're already quite well migrated along, it's a really good way of understanding how you can be using the tools better. As normal, the recordings are being made, and pop your questions into the chat. I've got Alice, Nick and Tom with us today to take us through this session, so we'll be able to talk you through anything. Pop your questions in as they come in. We'll either pick them up as we're going along or bring them in at the end as normal. Now, if you've got content or you're already using lists, and you may have seen a webinar a couple of weeks ago where we had TVP talking about TVP Enhanced, talking about how they're using a SharePoint list to manage something as complex as the corporate priorities, please get in touch with us through nepinfo@transformation.police.uk and we can understand what's going to be happening. Now, lists. We all use lists every day, and they can be as simple as a quick to-do list that we hold on Excel. You think about the property lists that are held, about what estate property we've got. You bet that there's a spreadsheet sitting somewhere with 1,000 registration numbers of all the vehicles we've ever owned and when their MOTs are due. Lists don't have to sit in Excel, and let's be honest, Excel isn't the most fantastic thing. I won't get Nick and Alice to say this, but it isn't the best thing at managing text and updates around those things. So perhaps lists is the way to go on this. So we're going to go through that and understand what they're going to be doing. So let's start off with a nice simple question, Nick. What are SharePoint lists?
That's a really good question, David. So SharePoint lists, think of it like Excel, but you can put lots more of sort of metadata in it. And what I mean by that is if you were in Excel and you have a column heading, with SharePoint lists, you can put a lot more information around that column heading. And those column headings then can dictate what people actually put within those rows of those information, if you were thinking of Excel in that way. I think with lists, it's just in such a sort of prettier way of actually showing your information. I don't think you'll go back once you start using lists, and they're very powerful. You know, we'll lead on to in a second around sort of that automation that you can use within lists as well.
No problem. And that's one of the key points, isn't it? We sometimes love the Power Automate, and Power Automate is one of our most replayed webinars at the moment on the YouTube channel. But to get the value out of Power Automate, you've really got to have a list sitting underneath it to pull the data, to save the data, and to move that forward. So in some ways, perhaps starting with lists before the Automate is a good way to start, because you start getting value straight away out of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Start with a list, understand what you can get from a list, and then that Power Automate, I think, goes quite natural with it. You'll realise then things like, how can I push information into my list automatically? How can I pull information out? How can I, for example, if a list has a new entry, a new asset maybe that you've created, how can then that have a flow that actually does something for you in that sort of workflow environment? So absolutely.
No problem. So we've got your screen on, Nick. So where do we start with lists? Where do we find them?
Okay, there are a couple of places to find lists, and the reason why is because Microsoft Lists is actually SharePoint lists, so you will find it in SharePoint. You'll also find it here. So today I've actually launched lists from this little app launcher, so you should be very familiar with office.com within your browser, and you can actually find lists here within that app launcher. The other way you can find it is actually within SharePoint. So I can see here I'm in SharePoint. I'm just in one of my SharePoint Teams virtual training, and you can find to create a new list here as well. There is also another place to find it is actually within Teams, and I'm going to show you how to use lists within Teams. So in here, I've got a team, my digital services team, and I've created a channel, a topic of conversation with regards to asset management. And I've actually created already here a list to go through today, but I'm going to show you how that list was implemented and how it's formed and how I can amend it and add new entries. And the first thing I did is actually click on the little plus button here. And what you'll find, whether you're using the list area here within office.com or even SharePoint lists, the interface that you receive is exactly the same in any of them. So if I'm just going to go into Teams, click on Add tab, I can click on Lists. My little demo tenant's a bit slow today. Click on save. Okay, and the first thing it would ask me is, okay, what do I want to do? Do I want to create a brand new list, or maybe I have an existing list? So let me just show you if you an existing list. It gives me the option here to tab something I've already put in place. Maybe I've already got a SharePoint list in place. I can just copy and paste that link here, and it was just tab it here for my users, people I collaborate with. A really easy route to find that list that we want to work on together. Or as you can see here, there's two lists that actually already form part of my team that I've already created. So again, it's just a way of shortcutting the lists I've already got in play. But actually today I'm going to show you how to create a new one. So let's create a list. And this is the screen that you will receive and you'll get familiar with whichever way you get into lists, whether it goes through office.com or whether you go through SharePoint. This is the screen that you see. And you've got quite a few options here. You can create a list, a blank list from scratch. So you create all those types of column headings and what type of column headings you want. You can pull it in from Excel. It's a really good one. If you've got lots of Excel spreadsheets already, click on this one and you can build that list from that Excel spreadsheet. Or again, you can click on here from existing list already. Now, the one I'm going to show you today is actually from a template. So these templates, I think, are really cool. And the reason why is because it already gives you a really good base to create your own list. So if I have a look at the asset management template here, it gives me all my headings that come with this template. And you know, even if I don't want some of these, it could be a really good place for you to start because actually it's already got a lot of information in there. So I've actually already placed this template within Teams and I've called it device inventory. So let me just pop over to device inventory. So when this template came into this tab and I called it a device inventory, it gave me all these column headings. It didn't give me the information, the actual list items itself. I've created those and I'll show you how easy it is to create those items. Now remember, this is a template. Now there's some things here that I might not want, or maybe I might want to change some settings. And a classic in this particular example is actually when we talk about the purchase price of some of these items, you can see it's in dollars. And I'll show you how easy it is to change some of the information within these column settings in lists. So if you just click on the actual column itself, I'm just going to go down to column settings and I'm going to go to edit that column setting. And you can see here, this template says dollars, and I'm just going to move it here to United Kingdom and pounds. And I'm just going to click on save. So it's really easy to manipulate your templates. I'm also going to add, just because in the interest of my demo, I'm going to add within the asset type here, a new type of asset. So you can see here, out of the box is given me some of those assets regarding this asset management sort of IT. And if I wanted to, I could add another asset type. So I'm just going to add keyboard. Also, if you scroll down, you could look at more options down here. And under more options, you've got some sections here. I find this one here is really handy. It's a mandatory field. If I toggle this one, it means that your users, whoever's adding information into this list, has to add this specific piece of information. But I'm not going to add that today. If I click on close, okay, so in here, I've got an option now to add a keyboard. So if I'm a user and you've given me permissions to add information into this list, there's a couple of ways of doing it. Click on new item here. And the nice thing about lists is that actually, rather than Excel, where you've got to go lots of lefts and lots of downs to find the next field and you're going across column by column, the nice thing about this list is it actually produces a nice little SharePoint form for you. So as a user, it's really simple to use. So I'm going to add some information about a new item that I'm going to add to my list. I'm going to add a new keyboard. Okay, and I'm going to call it a wired keyboard. I'm going to put a purchase date. I'm just going to flick through some of the fields here. You'll see here I've got a little asterisk on this one, the asset tag. That's because it's a mandatory field. I have to add an asset tag into this particular new item. I could add a purchase price, as we did just now when we changed it from dollars to pounds. I can say if it's a status, but you know what, it's available, it's in stock. And the color, we're going to go for a nice little black keyboard. I could even put the purchase order. And again, these are fields that belong to that template, but we can change the name of that field and what it actually represents. Add a purchase order number, manufacturer if I wanted to, serial number, and I could allocate it to a user. I'm going to allocate it to Nesta. And then I click on save. And you'll see my asset tag didn't follow suit. As you can see here, it pops up within this list. If I wanted to, I could sort alphabetically A to Z. Now, for example, this one here, say if I'm collaborating with my team and actually I needed more information about this asset, what I could do is actually click on that asset itself. It brings up the information that I've just keyed. I can add a conversation here. So maybe I could say at Nesta, I say, oops, just get my keyboard. Do you still have this keyboard? You could ask your team maybe a question with regards to that particular asset. Now, the experience from Nesta, if I just bring over Nesta's screen here, Nesta would have received a little activity here. Megan, within the digital service asset management channel, is asked a question, do you still need this keyboard? And Nesta could respond, or maybe could go into the actual asset itself and change that availability to maybe that it's no longer available, that he actually is using and has that particular asset. So that's how you can quite easily add items and also maybe query with your team specific informations around those list items. The other thing you can do, and it's a question that we get asked quite frequently, is around how you can import information into your list. So you created this great template, you've amended some of those column headings. How do you actually get information, maybe from an Excel spreadsheet from another team, to build this content? And what you can do is if you just change it to, so I was quite quick there, if you go into your grid view, okay, you click on new item down here. What you can do is actually start copying and pasting from Excel. Now, the real key and the tip here is make sure you've got that little square on the bottom there. Okay, if you don't have it, and you can see here, I don't have it. When you copy and paste, it will copy all of your columns of information from Excel into that one cell. So it's really important you get that little anchor symbol there. So I have a little Excel spreadsheet on my other screen, just this one here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this information. Okay, get that one there. Just did a Control-C on my keyboard and make sure that I've got that little anchor. Yeah, I did it again. And I'm just going to click on paste. There you go. And you can see those items have been added. Nice, so very, very straightforward, nice and easy. It didn't actually copy a picture because I didn't put a hyperlink in my Excel spreadsheet to those pictures of those items. If I exit grid view, you can see those items have been added in here. So it's really straightforward to actually import information into your list. You can export information as well if you wanted to Excel for your list items as well there. Excellent. Some other things that you can do within lists, you can, if you wanted to, choose some filters. So whatever your list is regarding, you can use the little filter button here. So if I just click on filter, perhaps I want to know what items that Megan has. Okay, I can click on that one and I can see that Megan has 3 items allocated to her. I could also to see, okay, how many drones do we have? How many items do we have within our register here with that particular, category of a drone? And there's lots of little filters down here that I could use. Maybe which ones are available. I can see there's 3 items available within my asset list here. So quite powerful around the types of filter you can add, and it all relates to the types of columns that you've got there.
Nick, there's a couple of questions come in, and Tracy from PDS asking about how do you make a column that's a selection of options as choices? How do you make that possible, or add another choice in?
That's a really good question. So this is my list. I'm going to just scroll to the end. Remember, this is a template. I didn't create it from scratch, but I can manipulate those fields. I can right at the end add a new column. So what you can do, these are all the different types of columns information that you can collect. Maybe I want to do a single line. Maybe it needs to be a location. I can do a multiple choice. So there's lots of headings there, Tracy, that you could use in that sort of column setting, just to make sure that the information that you're collecting from these new items correlates to exactly what you need. Is it a multiple choice? Is it a date format? Is it maybe a location format?
And I think one of the questions was, if you go into the choice one, how do you add the different categories into choice?
There we go there. Okay, so what you can, so what you can do here, there's the choices here. So maybe this one is bad example, but I'll just put keyboard again. Something like that if I wanted to. So you can change them and you can add. So there's 3 by default, but you can add more if you wanted to. And you can color code them. Maybe color is really important sometimes within some of these forms. If you've got quite a complex form, you can maybe color coordinate if you wanted to. Just remember from an accessibility point of view that maybe from a color blindness or as I say accessibility, that might not necessarily hit all of your audience of this list.
And I think one of the advice I've been using lists for quite a while, but I'm just starting again actually, is if you use the template and you've got, have a look at what columns are available from the template and use them if they can, because there's a lot more coding gone in behind the priorities template than it would be from building a simple column that says priorities and you put them in. So you would get a lot more value out of the template if you use some of the functions in there, but you can move the columns around in terms of the order they appear, and you can just hide columns out of the template, can't you, quite easily?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just the fact that the easiest thing to do is once you actually use a template, if it's the one that you have the most amount of sort of column information that you believe you need, you can just click on the column itself, and you've got lots of column settings here. You can hide the column, you can move it left to right, you can format it differently if you wanted to. And as I said here, you can edit the fields, add some more multiple choice options. You can have it as a mandatory field if you wanted to, or delete it.
We are getting loads of questions, so we'll come back to them in a second. But I think one thing I'll just point out, there is a template for issues. So that could be your RAID log, your threats, and all those sort of things. They could be really helpful for program teams, and that template's one of the default ones that's there to use.
Excellent. Okay, I'm going to jump into SharePoint a second. So this is a SharePoint list. You can do lots of things within Teams itself, but sometimes you do need to drop into SharePoint just to get that added functionality. So what you need to do, as always in 365, those three dots always mean something wonderful is going to happen. Click on Open in SharePoint, and as you can see, this is our digital services team. We've opened it in SharePoint, and you can see the list here. Now this, remember, is just SharePoint. So what you can do from here, all the functionality that you have in SharePoint today. And we did a SharePoint session, I think, was it last week, David, or the week before? Yeah. So from here, you can use your little three dots. And if you wanted to, you can have a look at maybe some alerts. So maybe this item is specifically important to you. You could have an alert set up that if anything changes on this specific item, that you'll get an email. So that's really cool. So I'll just set that one up. The other thing you can do, if an item is deleted in error, you can use the recycling bin within SharePoint. And again, these are some examples here that I have deleted. You can just click on the item and click on restore, and it restores it back to that list. The other thing you can do, if maybe you've got an item and you want to share this item information with a user, you could use the little share button, and you can share that link with an individual. I have got an example. Let me just find it here. Let's have a look. Under manage access, let's see. Oh, not that one. Might be this one here. What you can do, I'll share it anyway. So say, for example, okay, it's playing up. Okay, say, for example, I want to share the drone information with maybe my manager or somebody. I can click on the little share button, and I can add my manager's name. I can add a little message about that particular item, and I can send it. And within that, within SharePoint, within Manage Access, click on the three dots, click on Manage Access. On the right-hand side, you can see there's a link being set up. So let's have a look to see that what that link is actually being set up, who it's been set up to. Click on the three dots, you can see that the link has been shared with Patty, and Patty can edit. And that was the share access I just set up. And again, because it's SharePoint, if I wanted to, I can just remove the link, and therefore Patty doesn't have access to that particular shared list item anymore.
And linked to that, Nick, there's a question in there about, are there any implications to lists regarding collaborative working, i.e. two people filling out the same field at the same time?
That's a very cool question. Something I've not actually tested, to be honest with you, David. I'm not quite sure if you open a list item, whether it locks the list item or whether each column is listed, but we can take that away as a question just to double check, because I obviously.
Yeah, my experience was that you can't change the same field on the same item, but you could be doing a lot more work around it, so it just does not work.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing you can do, and it's again sort of quite a popular question, when you create a SharePoint list, you may not want all of your audience to add new items. And how you control these permissions is actually through SharePoint itself. So remember, this list here we actually started and created in Teams. And in Teams, we've got a few people that are members of this team. Okay, so we've got a few members and a few owners. Now, going back into SharePoint, this is my SharePoint list that we talked about just now. What you can do is click on the little gear symbol in SharePoint, which is where your settings are held. And if I click on Site Permissions, and I just go down to the Advanced Permissions, I could set up my permissions that maybe certain groups of people can view the content, and maybe not actually edit it. And maybe there's specific groups of people that can edit. So in this one here, say, for example, the members of this actual team, I don't want them to edit. They've got edit access here. Now, I've actually already started to play with these permissions already offline. So you can see there's a bit of a warning here. So let me just show these items because I've already made changes. And I'm just going to manage permissions of this particular list. Now, if I actually click on the members of this team, not the owners, the members of this team, I can edit access. And maybe what I want them to do is actually, I do really want them to edit. I want them to add, delete items of this list. And you can click on OK. Okay, you can see here the members of that particular group, that team, can actually edit. And again, it's very simple to go back in here. And maybe you don't want them, you just want them to have read access of the list going forward. And you can change permissions here within SharePoint. So that's just within the gear symbol, and then it's with permissions. And you can see your group memberships here.
And similar link to that, there's a question about, is there a history created for each item? Is there a versioning like the rest of SharePoint?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and I can lead on to that. So just like SharePoint, because it is SharePoint, you can click on your little 3 dots and you can look at the version history. So I think this might be a good example. So in the version history here, every change that I've made to that little item there, that drone item here, has been listed. Now, try not to sort of look too much at this. This is because there's a picture that's been added of that drone. Okay, that's why there's a little bit of sort of gobbledygook. But you can see here, there's been a change here to the serial number. The purchase price was 9,000. You can see here, I've given, so this is the item that's actually been created. So that was the first version number. And you can see here, there's version 2. I've added a title. Version 3, I've added, changed the status, and I've added the amount there as well. So absolutely, there's version control within the list items, and they do specify the changes. So it's nice and clear to your audience, the changes you've made going forward.
That's fantastic. There's another question here about attaching documents to a list. So can you put a link to a document such as Word, an Excel, or an email into a list?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's all around your column headings here. So you could create a column to attach a file. We've got one here to attach a picture. So it's looking for you to upload an image. So when we went into sort of new item here, oops, you can see here, this field here, this column is expecting me to add an image, and it takes me there to add an image. So you could have something to upload a document. It could be in a Word, Excel, PowerPoint. It could be a photograph of something, anything you like, but you can actually upload here within a particular type of column.
That's fantastic. Okay, so what if something does get deleted? How do you get to the recycle bin?
Yeah, you've got the recycling here, David. So again, just it's exactly the same as other items in SharePoint. Listed here are some items. I could just click on it and click on restore, and there you go. I'm quite sure if that's a new one. And then if I go back into my item, my SharePoint list, there's my SharePoint list. You'll see, unfortunately, because we've made so many changes, I'm not quite sure. It was 4, wasn't it? That one there. That was the one that that was the one that we've just restored. So it just pops it back into that list for you. Yeah. So yeah, recycling bin, that does take into account your retention periods of your force. So it is worth checking with your transformation team or IT how long those items stay in your recycling bin for.
One of the other useful features that helps to, when you're sharing perhaps view rights to it, is you can create different views of a list, can't you, where not all the fields might be visible to all the users?
Yeah, but I haven't got actually an example here set up, unfortunately. But yeah, you can create different views here. Maybe some items are hidden. Have you got an example there, David, of where you've actually changed a view, a specific view? I mean, you can.
No.
The other thing you can do with lists is if you are at a stage of looking at the Power Platform, you could have a nice little interface of your list from the Power Platform. And from the back of that, then you could potentially use sort of Power Automate to automate some of the functionality, maybe adding, updating information into your list.
And speaking of Power Automate, obviously you can have a form that fills in entries onto a list, can't you, quite easily?
Yeah, it's very easy within SharePoint lists to actually add some rules and some automation around it. You can integrate it with Power Apps and Power Automate, maybe to put together a nice little dashboard through Power BI as well.
And that's one of the questions in here, that we've got a force who's currently using Excel to record cases, who's allocated date received, due, etc. We need to produce stats and graphs. Is this doable based on a list?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, maybe the solution there is to use Power BI. and for your graph scenario, but to pull information from the information that you've actually already got within the lists. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I believe there are some views you can do to have a look at how many things are at certain statuses in lists and things like that. So there's a lot you can do around that. And we can go into some more detail about that on another occasion, or we can go into the learning centres where you'll find a lot more about that as we move forward. Another couple of questions if we can, and hopefully Tom will join us. If not, I'll cover his item. But is there a threshold? Somebody's encountered the 5,000 item threshold for a SharePoint list. Have you come across that one, Nick?
I have. I actually researched it recently because our limits often change. 30 million items. That should keep you going for a little while. And there is a file attachment maximum size of 250 meg. Again, that's plenty for an attachment. So yeah, 30 million items.
And there's a question here from Tim in Leicestershire about, can you freeze individual columns like in Excel style? I think that's probably about making sure you've got the columns in the right list order and creating a different view that you can do things.
Yeah, you can move your columns around. You can hide them if you wanted to. There's lots of configuration within your list, and it's all to do. That was just drag and drop. You can just click on the actual item column itself. As I said, go into your column headings if you want. You can move left to right, hide columns, and change some of the configuration.
We do also have a question, Nick, from someone asking if you can link calendar Outlook appointments to obtain data from there to create a list.
Export a calendar into a list. I can't see no reason why not, because what you could do from Outlook is export a calendar to a CSV file and then import that CSV file into Excel or into here. So remember, we went into grid view and we just literally copy and pasted Control-C and Control-P on your keyboard. So you could do something like that here. SharePoint, you already have a calendar within SharePoint. It's not a shared calendar from Outlook, but there is an ability to add a SharePoint calendar within your team as well here, which we can go into maybe in a different session.
Okay, so just a question about licensing. Which license is this including? Well, it's from the standard E3 onwards, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is out the box E3. You don't need an E5. I know some of you have already upgraded to E5, but this is out the box E3.
Yeah, so again, if you've got the standard NEP build, then away you go. You've got access to this in force. It's all been approved, gone through the blueprints. It's held in the same data sets as the rest of SharePoint, so it is rated to official sensitive, so you can put case reference numbers in and things like that quite happily to move this through. We've had a couple of questions about access levels, which I think we've covered as we've gone along. Similarly, one on charts, etc. So just as we're getting close to the end now, I'll just quickly, if I share our screen from my side of it all, I'll show you a SharePoint list that many of you have probably actually already been using across at the moment. So if you visit the Enabling Centre, I'll get the screen up. There we go. Too many screens on my computer. There you go. You'll be, hopefully some of you be familiar with this, and we are working on a list-based solution that'll give you more access. When you drop into the solutions catalogue, and you get that fantastic view that we've got built on the Power Platform, actually sitting under that is SharePoint lists. So just like you'd expect to see here, there's our SharePoint list for the apps catalog. Go into there, and again, you're looking at that familiar site that you've just seen from Nick around the approach and how you manage that. So all this is in that SharePoint lists space as well. Similarly, if I go to my list where I've got a couple of lists I've got access to here, you can see the use case adoption list is there. Again, a different format, different way of looking at it, and go into each section, update the content, and manage that, where we've been then producing a view-only view for you guys out through the Enabling Centre, etc. So those are the sort of things that you can do with it. If you think about some of the other webinars we've done recently, you'll see some of the details of how lists can be used to empower things moving forward. A lot more potential in lists than we've probably covered today, but hopefully it's got you interested. Some of you may be thinking, oh, I might be exporting my Excel over to a list in the very, very near future, and we hope that's the case. And then please tell us how you get out on with it. Certainly something I'm doing some work on at the moment about creating a new website. I've created a list to do all the content planning, who's going to approve it. I'm going to build in some approvals to it, so when the business owners signed it off, I can date that. So that will be a really good way of helping us manage a piece of business that we're involved in at the moment. But if you think about it, there's the huge potential for stores, departments, estates, fleet, but even local policing, your key individual networks, who's the residents association chairs, having them on a list was probably easier to manage than an Excel. You'll get more value out of it. I'd like to thank Nick and Alice in the background who's been helping with the questions as we've gone through today. We've only got one more webinar before we're taking a summer break. We'll pop the link in the chat in a second, but next week we're going to be looking at the learning pathways. Now this again links back to the Enabling Centre. If you've been on the Enabling Centre and looked at the productivity tools tab, that is the learning pathways that we've built, and learning pathways is basically your online help center tutorial guide, all from Microsoft about the products, so you can build that on your own tenants or intranets in seconds, and Nick will take us through that next week as we move things forward. So I've just popped the link into the chat so you can join us next week and move that forward. I have popped a link in the chat earlier about signing up to the mailing lists so you can get regular updates on when we're planning to bring back the webinars from the beginning of September, with a lot of great new content, particularly featuring stories from the forces who've been doing things. So again, please get in touch with that as we move things forward. So that's hour, on time again. Hopefully you can join us next week for our last webinar, and we see you soon.